Okay.
So now I had a little bit of managerial know-how that I'd gleaned from these video arts. By the way, my video arts interest continued because their studio was literally 4 or 5 doors from the Soho Street Temple. So I literally watched just about everything they had available.
Did they sort of show
Um,
you like humorous uh like ways of how not to manage things?
yeah, basically.
They made it like into satire, which is okay. That's nice. Yeah, that's cool.
No, it was an effective tool for its time.
Yeah, sure.
But now I was watching the temple president and the vice president conduct their business as leaders, and I
Mm.
was starting to understand everything that the Belfast devotees had been saying to me.
To you.
Oh, they get so much more buy-in if they actually involved others in making this decision rather than
Yeah,
taking the decision and expecting others to carry it out and so on.
sure.
Now, there was one very significant temple council meeting. I won't mention names here, but the vice president, the number two,
Mm.
wanted to exit someone from living in the temple.
Uh-huh.
And the pretext for this was they're not going to the morning program. So this was around the time, I think it was around this time I started reading Stephen Covey uh, and discovered this whole idea of being principled. And therefore, all decisions should be made on the basis of principle. So I was thinking, okay, let me apply that thinking to this discussion. I was a member of the Temple Council somehow.
Sure.
Um, is that a standard that we have articulated somewhere that he would know that he's in violation of? Has anyone ever told him he's at risk of
Yeah.
losing his right to live in the temple? Or is this just something we've conjured up all of a sudden and aren't universally applying it? And we haven't given any notice or therefore a chance to improve. And I just started asking questions. It wasn't exactly a challenge, but I was just a bit concerned that we were doing this arbitrarily rather than being in a principled fashion.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting. The vice president got so frustrated with the line of inquiry and the fact that he wasn't just holding sway in that meeting
Yeah.
that he immediately went and tendered his resignation to the UK leader at the time. I think he was trying to call the UK leader's bluff. Like if he offers his resignation because there's
The
people on
leader
the
will say,
temple
no, no,
council
no, no,
being
no, we'll do what you want.
obstructive,
Yeah.
that's what I think he was expecting.
Oh, I see.
But that's not what he got. And the GBC, the head honcho or whatever, said, "Thank you. I will accept your resignation." He instantly gave me that devotee's job,
All right.
and in fact, he also bolstered it. So he said, "Well, I actually want to give you all the powers of the president. The president can remain a spiritual figurehead with pastoral responsibilities, but you're going to take all the key decisions. You've got the," and so we ended up calling the role the temple manager.
Mm.
Within a year, I think the temple leader was so frustrated at not having any temporal authority that they also threw the towel in, and I became the president proper and so on. But it was fascinating for me that, and this ties back to a point we were making earlier, even though I didn't have the formal authority, I took a stand based on principle
Mm.
and became the moral authority in the room as a
Mm.
result. There's a lovely quote by an author called Susan Scott. In fact, she's quoting someone called Edwin Friedman or Edwina Friedman. I can never remember which. A person who can accurately describe reality without attributing blame
Mm.
emerges as the leader, whether designated or not.
Or not. Yeah.
So, very interesting idea. If you can tell the truth in a way that is respectful to others and doesn't get others offside, not at others' expense, you will, in fact, develop a kind of moral authority
Mm.
which potentially transcends formal authority.
Yeah.
Um, and it's an idea that really grabbed me this idea again that true leadership and true authority is something that is earned by being trustworthy and principled, and the manner in which you deal with people, and whether you can articulate a cause that they can put their heart and soul into.
And also having a sense of morality.
Absolutely. If you're unprincipled or immoral, unethical in any way, you will fail at the most essential ingredient, which is being trusted. If people don't feel they can trust a leader, that leader basically might still have formal authority. They might have the authority to boss you around, terminate your employment, and to chuck you out of the temple and stuff like that. But no one will willingly follow a person. They might follow out of fear.
Out of fear, yeah.
They won't follow out of respect. They won't follow out of believing that this is the right course of action. That actually takes quite a bit of work. It doesn't take a lot of work to borrow strength from one's position and threaten people. It's the oldest, carrot and stick stuff.
Style, yeah. It's the military style, right? Or that very, very old.
Then it goes back to those military models.
Yeah.
Sure. And the idea that you take such good care of people and invest to the point where they feel not indebted so that you've done it just to get that, almost in a manipulative way, but that you have earned the right to be regarded as someone who has leadership, that articulates a worthy vision. What I found, I'm still answering the question to some extent, my leadership journey. I found that I was then a much more consultative leader second time around, but it took the pain of the first failure for me to actually even be curious enough to go, why didn't it work? What was it that was wrong? What was I missing? And because there was enough, I guess, humility and openness or whatever to those questions, maybe circumstantially, I got information like Covey's writings and other things that helped me go, okay, I've now got an entirely different model I can run.
Yeah. I was just thinking when you were speaking there, is that a system that's not based on a strong sense of morality, and someone comes along with a strong sense of morality, it can disrupt the system, and people don't like a system being disrupted or changed. If you're used to a way of doing things, then someone coming along, like with what you did, you just asked a simple question or a few simple questions, and that triggered that person's whole sense of identity, and they try to manipulate the situation into getting what they wanted. Which I find is, it comes back to that insecure leadership that I was talking about, where the person, if you have a strong sense of accountability, that means you're honest, open, and you have a sense of humility within yourself. So that means your relationship with yourself is healthy, or at least has some healthiness to it, where a lot of people don't have that. They may be spiritual, but their sense of introspection on themselves is not at the same level of their, like, I can sit down and meditate for 2 hours every day. I can wake up at 3 a.m. and meditate. I can do this and I can do that. But their sense of introspection doesn't match their level of capability to actually just do things, which is that military mindset. Just do it. That's it. Just sit down, meditate 2 hours every day. Done. Just wake up at 3 a.m. Just read the book. Just go out there and do what you need to do to help other people. But that, if that doesn't come with the emotional maturity or that level of accountability and introspection, then you get a very interesting situation. You get someone who's supposed to have a lot of empathy and compassion, especially if they're a leader, but without the empathy and compassion. And then it becomes very hard. It's almost like a hard-hearted approach to a position that doesn't necessarily always need a hard heart.
Yeah, that's right. And Prabhupada would, the founder of the movement, would often emphasize that voluntary spirit, which leaders should learn how to engage and not kill.
Mm.
Um, so, you know, he was famously always about entrepreneurship and individual striving and people being independently thoughtful
Mm.
rather than creating a massive edifice, a top-down structure, and so on.
Mm.
And you could argue that servant leadership is probably the only thing that should even exist at all in devotee circles. Like, otherwise, what am I saying? I have dominion over you because I have this position. I
Mm.
have authority. My opinion is worth more than yours. My needs are worth more than yours. This is crazy. All of
Mm.
this would be anathema to someone who is thinking themselves as an eternal servant. This idea of service and, to your point, having an awake conscience or a deep inner life, these are really important aspects of, again, being trusted, being noble, being worthy of being followed,
Mm.
having that appeal, to people. Um, I was going to, I've lost my train of thought,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
I'll let
and
you
it,
come.
it it comes back. It comes back to what we were saying in the beginning, and the actual uh, reason for the podcast is the difference between management and shepherding. Someone who is awake to themselves and awake to their position with a broad mind will realize that it's got very little to do with me. I may have a vision and I may have a direction, um, but it doesn't necessarily mean that's the direction it's going to go, and it doesn't mean that's what needs to happen. Maybe something else needs to happen. Maybe the divine Krishna God has a different idea for the situation. So, what am I open enough to? Am I brave enough to have an idea, to have a vision for what I want? But am I open enough at the same time to be malleable to what God wants? And what God wants to come through, not just me, but the people around me. Because, I mean, it's not just about me. Just because I'm in a position of power doesn't mean everything's about me now. Because that's the opposite of what being a servant is. And that's what a leader is a servant. It's actually about what does God want. So yeah, it's an interesting dynamic. And I'm sure you've had some experience with that where you're like, no, this is exactly what needs to be done, but you were shown the complete opposite, maybe, or something like that. I don't know if you have maybe a story or
I think once I got this insight, as I say,
yeah.
I got the insight with all the questions I came out of my first managerial assignment, and I was able to take them into my subsequent managerial assignments. I don't think it's easy, by the way, but the other point I was going to make was
Mm.
about organizational effectiveness,
Mm.
because leaders play an enormous role in organizational effectiveness. In fact, you could argue it's their job to ensure the organization truly is effective. But determining what is even meant by effectiveness becomes something. I want to give you a slight anecdote, and then I'd like to drill into this idea a little. I remember I had someone who's a really good advisor for me, a devotee called Paramakaruna. He's left now, unfortunately,
Mm.
but he was arguably a stronger leader even than I was in those days. And I remember we were just coming up to the 25th anniversary of Radha Londoneshwara's temple, and we were organizing the sort of 25th anniversary celebrations, and there was some renovations that we were doing and other things. I remember him saying, you know, there are people still visiting this temple that were here in 1969, the year it opened, and they'll
Mm.
be here long after we've gone too. So who
Mm.
are we doing all this for? That was his meditation. You know, we're just
Here.
passing through.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, and another idea, it maybe ties in with shepherding, is the concept of stewardship. So yes, at this particular time, I have been entrusted with a given responsibility, which I'm carrying out on behalf of God. It's
Mm.
not that I'm somehow really special and I'm the owner of this, or I'm a steward. I'm taking care of something on behalf of others. It's a
Mm.
really important idea. When I think about organizational effectiveness, this was a concept that I started to grasp. Maybe it was around 1995. and it was at around the time I went to Bhaktivedanta Manor. I attended a Covey leadership course called The Four Roles of Leadership. Very interesting idea. So where the 7 habits is about personal effectiveness and interpersonal effectiveness, this now starts to look at what do leaders bring to organizations. And the 4 roles include pathfinding. Have we got a compelling purpose that people can put their hearts and souls into? Aligning, have we actually created a suitable infrastructure that enables the execution of the strategy? Empowering, have we allowed people to express their talent to the fullest extent? And then modeling, have we baked trustworthiness into the entire system so that we don't get unstuck when it comes to that all-important ingredient of trust? So, am I living the behaviors that I'm, preaching and those kind of things?
Yeah, sure.
Now, when looking at organizational effectiveness or coming up with a definition, you could say that a commercial enterprise, people will argue it's all about shareholder enrichment. In other words, there's a word that's typically used in organizational life, stakeholder. Anyone with some stake in the success or failure of the enterprise. So in most organizations, without question, whether they use other verbiage or platitudes or not, the owner is everything. Customers are paid lip service because we know if we don't give customers what they want, the experiences they want, the product that they want at the price that they want, we don't even have a business. And the owner's need for profit and wealth is undermined. So customers sort of become a necessary means to the end of shareholder enrichment. And then the last stakeholder they'll think of is the staff. They might have all kinds of platitudes like, our staff are our most important resource or our most important stakeholder. Yeah, not if you look at the way in which they're dealt with. They're often paid a minimal wage, not properly equipped to do their job, not given timely feedback. It's a wonder, and it's probably just an expression of the economic situation, that people turn up to jobs, they consider them a drudgery, and they really wish they were anywhere else, but they do need to trade their time for money so that they can pay rent. And that's all work is to them. That's such a horrible situation.
Yeah.
Now, if I take ISKCON as a different and far more complex entity, we don't have customers as such, as we in people who buy our product and in exchange for that product give us the price that we want to charge for that product. We have donors, and they're much more complex than customers. Why would they choose to keep giving when they don't have to?
Yeah.
What allows a donor to trust an organization? But then we have other beneficiaries. So that might be newcomers, but that might include the old devotees that used to live in the temple. That might include the children of devotees who used to live in the temple. That might include Sunday visitors, and some of those are for the Indian community and so on. Then we do have staff. We also have neighbors. That was a big learning for Bhaktivedanta Manor. We have neighbors who have needs and expectations, and if we don't take care of those, we have an awful lot of opposition on our hands, and so on. So this really grabbed me, this idea of who are all the different stakeholders. In other words, people who have an interest in the success of the organization and whose efforts actually make a difference to the success of the organization. Because then your very next thing becomes, well, who do we want to be of service to? What is the experience we want the Guru Kuli, the person who used to live in one of our schools? What experience, what services do we want to make available to them? What experience do we want to make available to them? And how are they currently experiencing the organization? What about the former residents who are now community members, who've got families and jobs and so on? What about the Indian community? What about the donors? What about the staff? What about the neighbors? And it becomes a very interesting exercise, because as a leader, whether or not it's catastrophic for the organization today, It would be catastrophic for a commercial organization to miss the needs of their customers. That would very quickly catch up with them in terms of commercial result. ISKCON can lose track of a stakeholder, and still apparently everything is going on. It's just that that stakeholder ends up becoming septic and possibly so disengaged they become a naysayer, or even someone who sabotages in some ways. And so it became a very interesting exercise, again, as a servant leader, to go, well, what experience did the Indian community have? What expectations do they have? That would appear to be a community we're doing really, really well with. Why aren't we doing so well with some of these other communities? Do we even have a vision of their needs, of their experience? Are we trying to optimize around their experience? Or are they surplus to requirements? Because the donors are the one who pay the bills. And to me, again, service means, well, I have to actually think about what's moral. I have to, like you were saying earlier, what's ethical. But I also have to think about what are the long-term consequences? Who should we be here to serve? And to me, you might still prioritize amongst those stakeholder groups, but you're going to arrive at a position that any of them deserve to be neglected. But that's what, in fact, we had done. And it explains a lot of the disengagement that we have around the ISKCON society.
But I mean, at the same time, it's like you can't make everybody happy, right? I mean, it's something that I've seen, and I've never had a formal leadership role. I've just led small things, small little activities or projects or whatever. And I realized quickly, very quickly, like if I try and please everybody at the same time as trying to please everybody, it's very difficult. And it will drain your energy and your creativity and your drive, because it's very impossible to please everybody. But at the same time, it's not that because now the main donors are coming from one group, that group has to be pleased to the detriment of another group, because otherwise you start becoming what that one group wants. And then you start losing that openness to everybody else. And Krishna consciousness or spirituality is for everybody. It's not just for one group. It's for everybody. All of us at the end of the day are souls. So if I'm just adhering to what one group wants because they're the ones giving the most, then it's like, to what extent? What extent is this going to start become suffocating for not only me, but for everybody else that's could be or potentially is involved?
I agree. Trying being all things to all people is definitely, it's going to drive you mad. But I think at least having a view, what is it that we want the experience of such and such a community to be? And the fact is, there'll be overlap. Like most temple visitors, there'll be a finite list of things they want to experience when they come. And it's not that they're necessarily all different. The other thing I would say, apart from maybe making deliberate decisions, whose needs can we not afford to go unaddressed and those kind of things, you're also thinking, well, this is a society. It's not that I, as the leader, have to be all things to all people. But if I'm trying to create conditions, remember we talked about getting the soil right. So if I'm trying to create conditions in which everybody treats everybody else as valued and worthy, if I want to create a culture like that, how do I go about that? And some of it's about your messaging. Some of it's about what you reward and encourage.
And also how you act, right? If I act open to everybody and I'm warm with everybody to whatever extent I can be, then it paves the way for other people. Because I often find that people generally stick to their cliques, and they will often have like a very, it's not negative, but it's just like they lack understanding of the other clique. And so there's a lack of warmth to the other clique, even in one community. And so if I am a leader in that community and I have a warmth with everybody, it shows other people that you can be warm with these people too, even if the person has a difference of opinion. It doesn't make you an enemy with the person. It just makes you a different flavor of the same truth. And somehow finding that middle ground with everybody is where the power lies.
And so I particularly think about former residents. So again, if we look historically, these might be people who joined in their youth, gave up some years to try and establish the movement, gave their hearts and souls, were used to being at the heart of it, acquired a lot of experience. Now, for varying reasons, but most of them sociological, they get married, they move out, they have kids, they work outside, they're no longer living on the property, but they still have experience, they still have a point of view. And the very least that they expect is to being able to voice that point of view and feel like vocalizing their point of view, somebody cares to hear it. It's not difficult. Like, I feel like just the practice of Ishtagosti, those communal gatherings where the leader is mostly interested in listening. Of course, they're hardly ever deployed anymore. And if they are deployed, something will be badged as an Ishtagosti that in fact is more about leaders telling you bulletins that they want to get across.
And I just want to highlight that the other day there was like an annual meeting of the top leaders in our spiritual community. And my first thought was that it's just going to be us listening to them, more like them listening to us, because that's just the way it seems like it's going and has been going for a long time. Is that, I just think that in our leadership at the moment, from what I gather, there's a lot of people who want what they want, and they're trying to protect the faults of the past rather than own up to the faults of the past. And that's becoming a big conflict. And people who are questioning it, like, for example, just coming to your Vedic Inquirer page on child protection, are being seen as rebels and being seen as you're not doing what we want. Even though you hold the moral high ground, it's going against our system, which is what we've created and built, and maybe not even intentionally, it's just the way that it's formed itself. Because a lot of leaders in the guise of traditionalism just have undealt with insecurities, and they find that traditionalism just so perfectly fits my insecurities that I don't have to deal with myself. I don't have to, if someone answers or questions me, I can just get rid of them to whatever extent that I can or want to. It creates a very unhealthy breeding space. There's a gap between the authority and the people, which is very notable. And it's coming through in ways like when there's an issue, a big issue like child protection, and there's nobody listening. Everybody is just trying to sweep it under the carpet, or they put the next person in power that's going to do what they want and not what everybody else is trying to pinpoint as an issue. Anyway, that's just my thought on that.
So 1995, I just started my service at Bhaktivedanta Manor, and I came to the conclusion, actually all of my knowledge comes out of a book. I don't have real world experiences. I'm trying to implement these ideas, and I'm trying to, introduce constructive change, but it is all theoretical. I was anyway needing to earn more for our livelihood. We had a small stipend as householders, but it wasn't adequate for our needs. So I decided to move into consulting, but my theory was always, I will learn some ideas and some tools that I can bring back to Prabhupada's movement, but I'll learn them in the crucible of the real world rather than just out of the book. And so I do. I have 30 years experience of, working at varying levels in organizations with these different ideas. I do have a cherished notion. I can start getting my hands on my pension or superannuation in about 18 months' time. And that means I will have a slightly reduced livelihood demand. I'll have a little bit of, stuff I've been squirreling away all these years to live on.
Yeah, sure.
I would love to offer my service as a consultant to ISKCON's leaders, and in particular, to re-establish Istagosti culture, and in particular, to do a survey of the community's needs and expectations broken down by stakeholder, and then to feed those into an Istagosti that's all about coming up with a shared vision. So again, it's not actually even on the temple president alone to decide, you know what, we need to put more emphasis on Gurukulis and more emphasis on old, alumni who used to live in the temple. No, the community decides, you know what, at the moment we have inadequate facilities for young children. We've decided that that's one of our top 10 initiatives for the next year. Now, obviously, it's going to require mature, and to use your word, secure temple leaders who are happy to share decision making, and even be beholden and accountable to their community.
At least they need to be willing. That's the first step in what I mean. Just the work I've done with myself through my own spiritual journey is that at least the willingness to want to be open. That's the first step. If at least there's a willingness, then you can work. If there's no willingness, it's hard to work. It's like if something is set in stone, it's very hard to work with that. But if at least there's a willingness, it makes the stone a bit softer that you can at least work with it, But if there's no willingness, it's like, what's the point,
Which is why I think the listening skill in particular, which is really what Istagosti is meant to be about, is so key. Because if I basically think, why do I need to hear other people's needs and opinions? I mean, I'm the authority. Then that openness that you're describing, that willingness to learn, that willingness to be of service to others isn't even present yet. Because I suspect in an Istagosti, one of the things, even if I'm a facilitator, let's say, of an Istagosti, if I'm going to establish a culture, I need to train up people who have those skills. But I think one of the biggest things is going to be get the leader to just be able to listen and not get defensive. Or not justify, or not any of the problematic behaviors they could exhibit that would convey to anyone attending that as to go, oh, this is a waste of time. We're dealing with someone who's fixed-minded and doesn't even have the slightest interest in what we think and feel and need.
That's a real life issue I faced, particularly just with one temple leader, and that's exactly that. I took it upon myself then to speak with all the other people in the community and to have what you said, a meeting in Istagosti. And basically, we just pointed out, I tried not to be rude about it, but it came across, I think, a bit direct, which people mistake for like either aggression or rudeness, but it's just being direct. And anyway, and the person just didn't seem to do well with it. He didn't stay very long because there was just it's like, I knew from the beginning when the person came into the authority position that this isn't going to work. I just knew it. I knew it and I could see it, and it was very hard for me to follow what the person wanted. I tried. It's not that I didn't try. I tried, but it was very hard for me because there was very it's like there was a mismatch in what the person was saying and what they were doing. So they would want something, but they would do the opposite of that, or they would do it for like a certain amount of time and then stop, and then expect everything to carry on without them. So there was just a lot of mismatches in what. So that's basically what I was just like, I don't get this. I don't get you. Where are you? Who are you? do you know who you are? Like, or are you just pretending to be someone? It's like this idea of I'm gonna jump ahead of who I actually am and become someone who I think I am. And then I'm missing all these steps between where I really am in terms of my advancement and what I'm portraying to myself and the other people. It's basically I'm lying to myself and lying to other people. And now I'm in a position of power and all these lies are coming to the forefront. And it was just like, it's a crazy situation. And eventually I just said, I'm depressed. I am depressed. I'm not a depressed person. Why am I depressed? There is something that is very wrong. And so I just had to speak with everyone and said, Everyone, literally, I'm depressed. I don't know why I'm depressed. Something is wrong. Do you feel the same? What do you think about this? What do you think about that? And basically had my own meeting with everybody, and then brought all the points to the person that was in the presidency role at that time. And the person couldn't give direct answers. It was a wish-wash of this answer, a wish-wash of that answer, a roundabout answer, like beating around the bush. And basically it was just exactly like, what was the point of the meeting? You know?
You would have been an enigma to that leader, because
I
they
was, yeah,
know
yeah.
how to relate to
We
you.
had a fight. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We had a few fights.
They would know how to relate to you if they could simply write you off as a troublemaker, which you clearly weren't being. They would all know how to relate to you if you're obedient order taker, but you weren't being that either.
Yeah, yeah.
So the fact that you had ideas of your own, weren't prepared to just simply submit, potentially were holding them to account. None of this computes.
Yeah, it's not that I wasn't
So
willing to submit. I was just willing to submit to the right intention through that person. But I couldn't find the right intention. That it just never came to me. It wasn't there. So it was very hard. I said to them straight up, I sent in a WhatsApp message. I say, I want to submit to your authority, but I cannot. I just can't. There's something missing. And they couldn't, there was just nothing. There was nothing from that. There was no connection. There was no like attempt to try, maybe in their own ways, but it was very like, the person was just very withdrawn and aloof from things, and they were in a position of power. So it was very weird. Yeah, yeah.
This is going to be one of the trickiest things about maturing leadership within the society, because this attitude that you're describing is deeply baked in
to a lot of leaders. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Generationally, and because they've also set up a kind of grace and favors culture, those who are emerging possibly to be the next wave, the next cohort, are all cut from the same cloth.
The same cloth, yeah, exactly.
So even if you're getting a lot of people like yourself and others who will arrive at different concepts of leadership, none of it fits into the little comfortable
box
positions that they're willing to recognize. Yeah, the comfortable little pots that they have available. They only have a few available.
Yeah.
A good little obedient, order taker, a troublemaker. There's not too much else in that simplistic universe, right? You're either an asset or a liability.
Yeah, yeah.
There's nothing in between.
Yeah.
And the unfortunate thing is there's a lot of available talent to this movement that is disengaged for exactly these reasons.
That reason, exactly.
The trickiest job we will have is somehow coaching leaders to get comfortable and recognize the need for the shift. Most of the time, if the world seems to be, falling into your lap, you've got no incentive to look at a different way of thinking.
Yeah, why change? Everything is perfect.
Change always comes from the edge, not from the status quo or invested in the way it is.
Yeah,
and that's going to be the biggest challenge.
Comfortability is a dangerous place to be. And that's what I find is some people don't realize that they're in. They get into a state of comfortability. I mean, having comforts in life is good. It resets your nervous system. It helps you to relax and feel joyful and awake and naturally open, but it can also become its own place for suffocation, where now you're just like, this is working. But when someone brings a different idea, for instance, the world is changing. If you keep things the same way, exactly how they were 5,000 years ago, it's going to suffocate, because the world is a different place. Yes, keep the principles alive. Keep the but change the details to match the world.
This is why the criteria for success is so important.
Yeah.
ISKCON doesn't actually have any success criteria which it measures its progress against.
Yeah. So maybe one thing it is that, is everything staying the same? That's a success criteria.
What you then have is the arbitrary criteria that each individual leader will use. And most of those leaders are itinerant. So they'll go from temple to temple. And if the temple has a reasonable turnout when